When I got engaged, I thought I was stepping into the happiest chapter of my life. I believed love had conquered everything, our different backgrounds, the gap between his wealth and my modest roots. But I was wrong. I wasn't walking into a fairy tale. I was walking into a trap I couldn't yet see. Stay with me while I share how everything unfolded, and if you feel the weight of my story, I'd truly appreciate your support along the way. My name is Rebecca. I didn't come from money or luxury, but I was raised with hard work, honesty, and love. Logan, the man I fell in love with, seemed to adore those very qualities about me. He was charming, successful, and confident, the kind of man who turned heads in every room. To me, he was more than that. He was gentle, protective, and promised me a future full of partnership. When he proposed, I felt like every struggle I had endured finally led to something beautiful. Logan's family was another story. Charles and Evelyn, his parents, were respected, powerful people in the real estate world. The first time I met them, they wore polite smiles, but I noticed the glances they exchanged, the way Evelyn's eyes lingered on my dress as if it wasn't good enough, or how Charles asked me about my little job, with a patronizing chuckle. Still, I ignored it. I told myself they just needed time to know me, to see how deeply I loved their son. Despite their subtle remarks, I stayed focused on Logan. I thought if he chose me, surely it meant we could rise above the whispers of judgment. After all, love was stronger than money, wasn't it? At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The wedding plans moved forward, and while there were moments of happiness, there were also moments that left me uneasy. Evelyn would occasionally drop comments like, "Marriage into this family comes with expectations," her tone sharp but her smile practiced. I brushed it off. I wanted so badly to belong, to prove I wasn't just the girl from a modest background clinging to their son. I kept trusting Logan. He seemed to notice the tension, but instead of speaking up, he often changed the subject or laughed things off. It worried me, but I convinced myself that once I became part of their family, things would settle. Maybe they just didn't know me well enough. Inside, though, I carried nerves I couldn't shake. Every time Evelyn looked at me like I was beneath her, or Charles spoke to Logan as though I wasn't even in the room, I felt smaller and smaller. But then Logan would take my hand, smile, and whisper that I was everything he wanted. And those moments silenced my doubts. I had no idea back then that their politeness was just a mask, and my blind trust in Logan would cost me more than I ever imagined. This was only the beginning of what would become the hardest fight of my life. A few days before the wedding, Logan told me his parents wanted to have a special dinner together. He said it would be nice for us to spend some quiet time before all the chaos of the ceremony began. I believed him. I dressed up, put on my best smile, and told myself this would finally be the evening where I'd feel truly welcomed into his family. I was wrong. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Evelyn complimented the flowers I had brought, though her tone carried that same stiffness I was used to. Charles asked about the wedding plans, nodding politely but never really listening. Logan sat beside me, holding my hand under the table, and for a brief moment I felt safe. We ate, laughed lightly at small jokes, and for once I thought maybe I was just imagining the coldness I often felt. But as soon as dessert plates were cleared, the air shifted. Evelyn gave Charles a quick glance, and then he reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of papers and slid them across the table toward me. "Rebecca," he said smoothly, "this is just a standard precaution. Something any smart family does to protect their legacy." I looked down at the document. A prenuptial agreement. My chest tightened as I flipped through the pages. The terms were blunt. If the marriage ended for any reason at all, I would walk away with nothing. No financial support, no share in assets, nothing. It was as if they had already decided I wasn't a wife, but a risk. I turned to Logan, searching for his eyes, waiting for him to say something, anything, to soften this blow. But he sat silently, his expression unreadable, as if he'd rehearsed this moment with. My hands trembled as I whispered, "Logan, is this really necessary?" Evelyn leaned forward, her voice smooth but sharp. "It's simple, dear. If your love is real, this paper won't matter." My throat burned as humiliation spread through. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers back at them, to walk out of that house and never return. But then I looked at Logan again, the man I thought was my safe place. He still said nothing. No defense, no comfort, not even a squeeze of my hand. Just silence that screamed louder than any words could. I felt trapped, cornered in a room that suddenly felt colder than ice. My heart ached, but my pride wouldn't let them see me cry. I picked up the pen with shaking fingers. "If this is what it takes," I whispered, forcing a weak smile I didn't feel, "then I'll sign." The pen scratched across the paper, sealing my name to their terms. Every stroke felt like it was cutting into me, carving away pieces of my dignity. When it was done, Evelyn smiled faintly, Charles nodded in approval, and Logan finally reached for my hand again, as if nothing had happened. Inside, though, something shifted. I told myself that love was enough, that Logan was worth the sacrifice. But deep down, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. A seed that would one day grow into something much stronger than I could have ever imagined. After the wedding, I told myself everything would get better. The prenup was signed, the ceremony was beautiful, and I was now officially Rebecca Carter, wife to Logan, daughter-in-law to Charles and Evelyn. I convinced myself that love would smooth out the rough edges, that once I proved myself as a devoted wife, their doubts about me would fade. So I gave it everything I had. I threw myself into our new life with all the energy and heart I could muster. I managed our home, making sure everything ran smoothly. Logan often came home to a cooked meal, an organized house, and me waiting with a smile, even when I was tired. I took care of the details he never noticed, laundry folded, bills paid, errands run, because I wanted him to feel supported. I thought if I carried the weight of the household, it would free him to focus on his career, and maybe he'd see my worth beyond what his parents believed. I also sacrificed dreams I once had. Before Logan, I wanted to pursue graduate school, maybe open my own small business one day. But the more I invested in our marriage, the more those dreams slipped quietly into the background. Logan's schedule was demanding, and I told myself my role was to stand beside him, not chase my own ambitions. It was supposed to be temporary, I thought, just until he was more established. But months turned into years, and I was still waiting for the moment when it would be my turn. Evelyn never made things easier. Her words were always polished with a smile, but they cut deep. At family gatherings, she'd say things like, "Rebecca, you're so lucky Logan allows you to stay home. Not every man would carry all the responsibility." Or she'd comment on how quiet I was, as if my silence meant weakness. I bit my tongue every single time. Fighting back would only prove her point, so I stayed calm, nodded politely, and hid my bruised pride behind a practiced smile. What hurt more was Logan's distance. At first, I thought he simply didn't notice the way his mother spoke to me, but over time it felt more like he chose not to. He rarely defended me, never called out her cutting remarks, and when I tried to talk to him about it, he brushed it off. "That's just how my mom is," he'd say, as if I was supposed to get used to being treated like I didn't belong. Slowly, I started feeling invisible. My efforts went unnoticed, my sacrifices unappreciated. I smiled for the outside world, but inside I carried a growing emptiness, like I was fading into the background of my own marriage. Still, I held on tightly, clinging to the hope that if I endured long enough, if I just stayed patient, love would prevail. I was determined not to let the cracks show, not to let Evelyn win. What I didn't realize then was that by hiding my pain, I was also hiding my power, and that silence would one day become my greatest weapon. The first cracks in my marriage began to show quietly, almost invisibly at first. Logan started coming home later than usual. At the beginning, he explained it away with excuses about meetings running long or unexpected deadlines at the I wanted to believe him. I told myself he was working hard for our future, that his long hours were sacrifices for the life we were building. But the longer it went on, the more uneasy I felt. There were nights I sat at the dining table with dinner going cold in front of me, the candles I lit melting down while the clock ticked past 10, then 11. When he finally walked in, his tie loosened and his tone distracted. He barely noticed me waiting. He would kiss my forehead lightly, murmur that he was exhausted, and retreat to the shower. I smiled and nodded, swallowing the sting of disappointment. I wanted so badly to trust him, but doubt had already begun to creep into the cracks of my heart. Evelyn, of course, made things worse. Every time we saw her, she found new ways to chip at my dignity. She looked around our spotless house and sneered that I had too much free time. She would remind me in front of Logan that a wife should contribute more than just housekeeping, as though raising a home and supporting her son's ambitions were nothing at all. I never snapped back. Instead, I let her words slide over me like icy water, burning silently, but leaving no visible mark. The breaking point came one evening at a family dinner. Their relatives had gathered, cousins, uncles, aunts, all dressed in their finery, sipping expensive wine around Evelyn's gleaming dining table. I sat there quietly, answering questions politely, keeping my smile in place despite feeling small in that way. Then Evelyn, in front of everyone, leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into that familiar, cruel smile. "Logan was so generous to choose Rebecca," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with condescension. "Not everyone would marry a charity case." The table went silent for a beat before laughter rippled through, half nervous, half genuine. My cheeks burned as if the spotlight was directly on me. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Logan shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Nothing to stop his mother, nothing to shield me from the humiliation. I clenched my hands under the table so tightly that my nails dug into my palm. I forced a smile and pretended I hadn't heard her. My voice remained calm, steady, even though my insides were shattering into pieces. Outwardly, I swallowed my pride again, but inwardly, something began to harden. That night, lying beside Logan in silence, I stared into the dark and felt a quiet shift inside me. I was done waiting for him to defend me, done hoping Evelyn would one day accept me. My patience, once a soft shield, was changing. It was no longer about enduring. It was slowly turning into resolve. Cold, quiet resolve that one day, I would no longer be the woman they thought they could walk over. The night I found out the truth about Logan will stay with me forever. It was late, another one of those evenings when he said he was working late at the office. I was cleaning up around the house when I noticed his jacket draped carelessly over the chair. As I picked it up, a small folded receipt slipped from the pocket. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another business expense, I assumed. But when I opened it, my hands froze. It was from a fancy restaurant across town, dated that very evening, with dinner for two. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably his. My heart started to pound, my breath shallow as I tried to convince myself it could mean nothing. Maybe it was a client dinner, maybe he wasn't alone with someone else. But deep down I already knew. Doubt had lived in me for months, and now it was staring me in the face. I grabbed his phone when he went to shower the next morning. My hands trembled as I scrolled through his messages, and there it was, Madison. A coworker. Their texts were full of inside jokes, late-night meetups. Words no married man should be sending to another woman. Reading them felt like knives slicing through me. My world collapsed in that moment. The man I had sacrificed everything for, the man I defended even when his silence betrayed me, had chosen someone else. I sat on the bed staring at the wall, numb and shaking. Every sacrifice I had made flashed through my mind, giving up my dreams, enduring his mother's cruelty, signing that cruel prenup. And for what? To be replaced by a woman he could flirt with over office lunches and secret dinners? Part of me wanted to pack my things and walk out that very second. But then reality hit me. The prenup. If I left, I would walk away with nothing. Not a penny, not a single shred of security after years of loyalty. That thought made me feel trapped, caged in a marriage built on lies. My heart was breaking, but my mind was already calculating. I could not collapse, not now. If I allowed them to break me, I would lose everything. Evelyn's smug smile flashed in my mind, her voice taunting me about being a charity case. Logan's silence echoed louder than her cruelty. They had underestimated me for too long. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, and made myself a promise. I would not walk away empty-handed. I would not let them discard me like I was nothing. If they thought I would sign away my worth and fade quietly into the background, they were wrong. Looking at myself in the mirror that night, my eyes red but steady, I whispered, if they think I'll walk away with nothing, they don't know me at all. It was no longer about saving the marriage, it was about saving myself. And from that moment on, I began to plan. After the night I discovered Logan's betrayal, something inside me hardened. I stopped being the wife who begged for scraps of affection. Instead, I became an observer, quiet but sharp, watching every move around me. If I couldn't win with love, I would win with patience. And patience, I learned, could be a dangerous weapon. I began to document everything. At first, it was just his late nights and the texts from Madison. Screenshots, printed copies, receipts hidden in a folder I kept locked in a small drawer. Every lie he told became a note in my secret journal. Every dinner receipt, every careless text, every excuse. The story of his betrayal was building piece by piece, and I was the only one holding the puzzle together. But it didn't stop with Logan. Evelyn's constant barbed comments, her humiliating remarks at family dinners, her suggestions that I was nothing more than a burden, all of it became evidence. I began recording conversations on my phone when I visited their home, careful to capture her tone, her words, the venom that dripped beneath her practiced smile. She thought I was weak, too quiet to ever fight back. She had no idea I was collecting her cruelty like weapons in my arsenal. And then there was Charles. He was always the proud patriarch, boasting about his empire, his perfect family, his successful business. But pride often blinds men like him. One evening, at another suffocating family gathering, I struck up a casual conversation with Daniel, the family's accountant. He was a polite man, a little too eager to talk after a few glasses of wine. He thought I was harmless, the quiet wife with no real understanding of finance. That night, he let slip something small, an unusual expense that didn't quite add up. I played dumb, nodding and asking simple questions, but inside my mind raced. Over the weeks, I found reasons to bump into Daniel again. A phone call here, a chance meeting at an event there. Slowly, carefully, he revealed more than he should have. Discrepancies in the books. Numbers that didn't align. Accounts that seemed to vanish and reappear. The Carter Empire wasn't as invincible as they wanted the world to believe. Behind the glossy walls, cracks were spreading in their foundation. The realization hit me like a spark in the dark. I had leverage. For years, I had been invisible, ignored, dismissed. But now, for the first time, I wasn't powerless. I had proof of Logan's infidelity. I had recordings of Evelyn's venom. And now, I had whispers of Charles's shady financial dealing. Each piece alone might not be enough, but together, they were dynamite waiting to explode. One night, as I sat alone at the kitchen table, my folder of evidence spread before me. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Quiet, steady, and burning in my chest. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was harmless. But now, the game was mine to play, and I wasn't going to lose. When I finally decided it was time to fight back, I knew I couldn't do it alone. Gathering evidence was one thing, but using it against a family as powerful as the Carters would require precision. That's when I found Angela Whitman. She wasn't flashy like the lawyers Charles bragged about at his country club. She worked quietly, out of a modest office downtown, with a reputation for dismantling cases piece by piece until her clients walked away stronger. She was exactly who I needed. The first time we met, I walked into her office clutching my folder of evidence like it was my lifeline. My voice trembled as I explained everything. Logan's cheating, Evelyn's insults, Charles's suspicious finances, and most importantly, the prenup that had trapped me. Angela listened carefully, never interrupting, her sharp eyes scanning me like she could already see the cracks in their armor. When I slid the prenup across her desk, my hands shook. This was the paper that had stolen my power years ago. Angela read it slowly, her brow furrowing, her pen tapping against the desk. Then, she looked up at me with the faintest smile. "Rebecca," she said calmly, "this contract is garbage." I blinked at her, confused. Garbage? To me, it had been a prison. She pointed out the flaws one by one. The coercion of signing under pressure at that family dinner, the lack of independent counsel from me, and the clauses that courts would throw out as unenforceable. "They thought they outsmarted you," Angela said, her voice steady, almost reassuring. "They didn't." For the first time in years, I felt hope. Real hope. Not the fragile kind I had clung to while waiting for Logan to change or for Evelyn to soften, but solid hope built on truth and strategy. I wasn't powerless after all. I had been silenced, yes, but I wasn't defeated. Angela leaned forward, her voice lowering. "We won't rush this. You've been patient for years. Keep playing the quiet wife. Let them think you're blind, that you're broken. Meanwhile, we'll prepare everything. When the time comes, they won't even see it coming." I nodded, my chest tight with emotion. All those nights I cried alone, all those times I swallowed humiliation, it was leading here. To this moment where my silence would become my shield, and my patience my greatest weapon. When I left Angela's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The world outside looked different. The streets were the same, the people passing by were the same, but I carried something new inside me, a plan. From that day forward, every smile I gave Logan, every polite nod I gave Evelyn, every silent dinner I endured with Charles was an act. I wasn't their quiet, obedient Rebecca anymore. I was preparing my escape, step by step, while they laughed and underestimated. They thought they had me cornered, but soon, they would learn just how wrong they were. Rebecca sat across from Logan in the study, the heavy oak desk between them like a battlefield line. She had rehearsed this moment for weeks, every detail carefully placed in her mind like chess pieces. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't crack. She laid the manila folder on the desk and slid it across. "Open it," she said softly. Logan raised an eyebrow, the smirk already forming on his lips. "What's this supposed to be? Another list of demands?" "Rebecca, you're not in a position to bargain. You know that." She said nothing. He flipped open the folder casually and froze. Photos of him tangled up with another woman spilled out, time-stamped and clear. Hotel receipts stapled neatly in chronological order followed. Rebecca had collected it all, meticulously, silently. Logan's smirk widened into a cruel laugh. "So, you think this matters? Everyone knows men with money play around. You'll huff and puff, but in the end you'll stay. Because if you leave," he leaned forward, his voice sharp as a blade, "you leave with nothing. The prenup makes sure of that. You'll walk out of here a broke, bitter woman while I live happily ever after." Rebecca let his words hang in the air for a moment, then tilted her head, studying him the way one studies an insect under glass. "That's what you think." Logan's laughter softened into smug silence. He leaned back, confident in his family's fortress of lawyers, contracts, and money. That's when Rebecca pulled out the second folder. Slim, precise, devastating. She placed it beside the first one. "These aren't just photos, Logan. These are records. Financial records." His eyes flicked to the papers, his confidence faltering just enough for her to see it. She leaned in, her voice calm, controlled, each word a quiet strike. "Do you know what happens when the IRS gets wind of hidden accounts? Or when shareholders discover money being siphoned? Your father's empire isn't as clean as it pretends to be. And I have every detail, every transaction. Every discrepancy. The color drained from Logan's face. He tried to scoff, but the sound caught in his throat. And about that prenup you're so proud of? Rebecca's lips curved into the faintest smile. It's riddled with errors. Unenforceable clauses. No independent counsel. Angela Whitman, my lawyer, says it won't hold in court. Not even close. The silence stretched between them. For the first time since she had known him, Logan didn't look untouchable. He looked cornered. Rebecca stood, her movements deliberate, her calm unshaken. She looked down at him, and for once, he didn't meet her gaze. You should be very afraid, Logan, she said, her voice low, steady, final. Because you and your family thought I was weak. But I was watching. I was waiting. She gathered her folders, turned, and walked toward the door. Logan's voice cracked behind her. Rebecca, wait. She paused for just a breath, then stepped out of the house. Not in tears, not broken, but free and steady, with a storm now in her control. The courtroom was colder than Rebecca expected, but she sat upright, her hands clasped together, her expression calm. Across the aisle, Evelyn and Charles wore smug smiles as though the verdict had already been written in their favor. Logan leaned back in his chair with the same arrogant smirk he'd worn the night she confronted him. To them, this was nothing more than a formality, a display of their wealth and influence crushing her into silence. But Rebecca had waited years for this moment. Angela Whitman rose first, her voice steady and measured as she approached the judge. Your Honor, the prenup presented by the Dawson family was not only unenforceable, it was coercive. My client was pressured into signing it days before her wedding without independent counsel. That alone renders it void. The courtroom stirred. Evelyn's lips thinned. Charles whispered something to his attorney, his confidence faltering. Angela continued, flipping to another tabbed section of her binder. Additionally, this contract contained unenforceable clauses designed to strip my client of her rightful share. It was never meant to be legal. It was meant to trap her. Rebecca kept her gaze on Logan. For the first time, his smirk twitched. Then came the part Rebecca had been waiting for. Angela presented evidence of Logan's infidelity. Hotel receipts, private messages, photographs. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Rebecca's dignity, long trampled, was finally defended in the open. Logan shifted in his seat, the smirk gone, his jaw clenched tight. And lastly, Angela said, her tone like sharpened steel, we submit financial records showing misconduct within the Dawson holding, fraudulent transfers, hidden assets, and schemes meant to deceive shareholders and this very court. Not only did they attempt to exploit my client, but they jeopardized the integrity of their own empire. The room was no longer cold. It burned with scandal. Rebecca didn't smile, but inside she felt the weight lifting. Every sneer, every insult, every whispered remark about her being the quiet wife who'd leave with nothing. All of it collapsed under the truth. When the judge delivered the ruling, Evelyn's gasp was audible. Instead of walking away penniless, Rebecca was awarded $28 million in settlement and assets. The number hit the Dawsons like a thunderclap. Charles paled, his hand gripping the table. Evelyn shook her head in disbelief, whispering furiously. Logan stared at Rebecca with wide, unblinking eyes. The courtroom cameras caught every second of their fall from grace. Rebecca rose slowly, her movements deliberate. She didn't need to gloat. The silence that followed her victory was more powerful than any words. As she walked out, reporters swarmed the hallway, shouting her name, firing questions about the scandal unraveling before the world. She kept her composure, eyes forward, leaving the chaos behind her. Inside, she felt a calm satisfaction. She hadn't just survived their cruelty. She had dismantled it piece by piece, until all that was left was their ruined empire and her freedom, secured with $28 million and the dignity they swore she'd never have again. The courtroom victory was only the beginning. The ripple effects of Rebecca's calm, relentless pursuit of justice spread like wildfire. Newspapers splashed the headlines across front pages. Bennett Empire exposed in fraud and infidelity scandal. Business partners who once lined up to shake Charles Bennett's hand now backed away, terrified of being associated with the crumbling dynasty. Evelyn, once the queen of high society galas, found her invitations revoked, her phone calls unanswered, her name whispered with pity and ridicule at the very luncheons she used to dominate. The lawsuits came fast and mercilessly. Former employees stepped forward, emboldened by Rebecca's case, to reveal mistreatment and shady practices buried under the Bennett's glossy image. Financial institutions froze accounts, investors withdrew, and the family's once massive influence shrank overnight. Charles, who had laughed at Rebecca's insignificance, now faced bankruptcy lawyers more often than business tycoons. Evelyn's diamond necklaces were pawned, her designer gowns auctioned discreetly, all in a desperate bid to keep up appearances that nobody believed anymore. And Logan, her former fiancé, the man who mocked her with that smug grin, was left standing in the ruins. Madison, The mistress who had once dangled on his arm like a trophy disappeared the moment the money and status evaporated. She left him with nothing but bitter silence and a string of unpaid bills. He tried calling Rebecca once, late at night, slurring into the phone, demanding to know if she was satisfied now that she had destroyed him. Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't need to. Silence was louder than any revenge speech she could have given. Rebecca, on the other hand, blossomed in her freedom. The $28 million settlement gave her more than security. It gave her independence, the ability to build a life that was hers alone, untouched by the suffocating arrogance of the Bennets. She invested wisely, quietly, and began supporting organizations that helped women trapped in similar situations, women who had been coerced, silenced, or stripped of their dignity. But Rebecca never flaunted her victory. She didn't show up at Evelyn's auctions to gloat, didn't post lavish photos online to rub salt in Logan's wound. That wasn't her style. Her revenge was not loud, it was complete. The Bennets had wanted her to leave with nothing, invisible and broken. Instead, they were the ones left shattered, invisible in a society that once worshipped them. One evening, months later, Rebecca stood on the balcony of her new apartment overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, her glass of wine steady in her hand. She thought of everything, Logan's smirk, Evelyn's disdain, Charles's threats, and felt nothing but calm. The storm was behind her, and she had walked through it without breaking. She whispered to herself, softly but with steel in her voice, "Quiet doesn't mean weak." And for the first time in years, Rebecca smiled, not because she had destroyed them, but because she was finally undeniably free. Do you think Rebecca was right to stay silent and let the truth destroy them, or should she have fought back loudly from the start? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.